Welcome to NightCon 2011. My name is Tom Greene. I was a writer and a producer on Knight Rider, and I've been asked by some very nice people, God knows why, if I would say a few words to you, which I'm delighted and honored to do. The reason I say God knows why is because I've been told that this is going to be shown on a big screen, and it's being shot in high definition, and this face in big screen on high definition can spell danger. And so I'm asking many of you to drink liquids. If you need to leave, do it quickly. If you're feeling a little faint or having heart palpitations, consult a physician. All right, well, at least now I won't get sued. It is, as I said, a great honor to be talking to all of you, and the people I want to make a big shout out to I have to read these here because these names are, well, the first name isn't bad. That's Steve Fawcett, and that's what I've been speaking with. Hello, Steve, and I think he needs huge applause because I've spoken to him on many occasions, and this is someone who is incredibly dedicated, and sounds like he's putting together a great event for you guys. Okay, and the second person, Rob, I've been told David Hasselhoff can't say his last name. Now, if David Hasselhoff can't say his last name and I can't say his last name, well, let's just say you put me in a really strange position here. I'm going to try Rob or Mondroy or Mondroid or Mondroid or Mondroid. Rob or Mondroid. Okay, you can let me know later by letter, email or fax how close I got and how foolish I was to Mr. Hasselhoff. Or Mondroid actually sounds like a character that I would have created on one of the sci-fi shows I did. The Amondroids are coming. We all the Amondroids. Okay, a big hello also to all you fans who came out from all over the world. I've heard that you even have fans there from Germany and the Netherlands. It was funny because I was speaking with my assistant, and I said, this is really wonderful. There are people coming from the Netherlands and from Germany. And she read the email that Steve gave me and said that you were driving out. And she said, well, they can't drive out. They have to go through the water. Because people in America, of course, have no concept of geography. I tried to explain how they annexed Poland, England, and France, and without having to go through water, but it was a blank stare because she had no idea what annex meant or what Poland meant, and if I mentioned World War II, she'd just think it was a sequel to another movie. But I want to say to all of you who are out there that doing Knight Rider was, at the time, a wonderful experience. I had a strange kind of experience in doing it because I was under contract to Universal doing many shows. Sometimes you do 2 or 3 shows at once because you were contracted as a writer-producer of the show, and of the studio, and you would do many shows. So many times while I was working on one show, you would be asked to come in and write episodes, stories, or rewrite of other shows. At the time we were doing Knight Rider and before, I actually started at Universal, which makes me feel very old, down in the days of, if any of you even remember a show, one of the very first shows I worked on was The $6 Million Man. I was 6.5 months old when that happened, but still I was working on that show. From that point through Knight Rider and a little after that, Universal was producing approximately 24 one-hour episode dramas a week. It was, in the good sense of the word, a factory, and everyone helped each other. Universal was like a family. Even the big, what we call the Black Tower, where they all the executives had an enormous sense of loyalty to the company. And if you were a Universal person, boy, you could stay there for years and years and years unless you did something pretty awful. Nothing like this exists, especially the executives. Executives remain there for years and years. And as writer-producers, we had a wonderful, wonderful time. The reason I mentioned that was I was producing a show called Magnum P.I., when Knight Rider was coming out, and one of the first executive producers of Knight Rider was a gentleman who had worked on all the Jack Webb shows. You may know Jack Webb from shows like Dragnet, Emergency, Adam 12, and things like that. He acted in Dragnet. You may have seen him. But Bob Senator kind of came from that type of group, and he was a very meticulous person and loved to write memos. And I started at the very beginning writing memos and writing things for him as he was actually helping Glenn Larson in the creation of the show. And it's very funny because I, as you can see, not only can blah, 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 babble a lot, but I write like I talk, in the sense that there's lots of words that go down on paper. And so we would have these memos back and forth on Knight Rider that would go on and on and on. I sadly don't think I have any of them. I wish I did, because I think after a while it was almost a match to see which one of us could wear out more secretaries in doing dictation. And those are the days when there was no email, of course. There was not even any computers. But we also had women, or men, but mostly women, who actually wrote in a thing called shorthand, and you would actually dictate to them. You see this in old movies, and they would take that shorthand and write memos and type back and forth. It was a great time. When we did the show itself and we were doing enormous amounts of rewrites, it's interesting because on computers they have a thing that says cut, paste, and all these expressions and so forth. Well, those literally come from the days when we literally would take a piece of a scene and take scissors and cut it and then paste it to another place, and then we would take if we had to change dialogue or something, we would write it in corners and make like comic book circles, and then bring it over and actually take the line, bring it down to the actual dialogue and so forth. And we had a steno pool, which were these women. There were 3 shifts. They were 24 hours a day, who would keep rewriting and rewriting scripts. And scripts in those days would go through different colors, and you would have a rainbow, which is why you have that rainbow look if you ever see scripts in that time. And you might not believe it when you look at Knight Rider, these shows, but an enormous amount of work went into it. You first talked about an idea. That went into what's called a step outline. That went into an actual treatment that you had to write, which was basically a full short story. And then from the short story, you'd start doing first, second, third, fourth editions. And then through the shooting, virtually every day there would be revisions. Maybe that's why shows like Magnum and Knight Rider and Columbo and Kojak and all these other shows remain, and we keep in Hawaii Five-0, which is now a big hit again. All these shows have such a following, and they keep trying to repeat them, including Knight Rider, which has tried to be repeated many times. But because there was an enormous care to the stories, and as silly as it might have seemed about a man in a talking car, there was an enormous amount of work that was put into those. One thing I'll just say very quickly, which is kind of funny. We use these things called typewriters, which some of you might remember. They're a big kind of metal thing, and you would put a thing called paper into them, and then you would you'd have a little roll, and you would roll it up, and then you would hit the keys like you do now, but instead of it going on a screen, there was a little ball, and it had all of the font, all the little letters and numbers on it, and it would actually use a thing called the ink and print onto the paper. Of course, I mean slightly ludicrous here, but it is scary how many people I've talked to who are assistants of mine who are in their teens who literally do not know what a typewriter is. But anyway, the interesting thing about it is one thing, if you look at these stories, that you'll notice that in many cases the stories moved very quickly, and that there was a sense from one moment to another of tension, of development, of something happening. And I learned from a great mentor named Joel Oleansky, who was one of the great writer-directors of the time, a great trick. And it was a trick that many people used, and something you should know that was used on Knight Rider quite a lot. I don't know if I started it or it was before me. But first of all the scripts are usually written on yellow paper. And the reason you use yellow paper is because no one likes to write what they think is the final draft, so you don't want to put something on paper. So if you have white, you think, oh my God, this is the final draft. If it's on yellow paper, it looks like, oh, this is just a draft. This is just something it's sketching out. Now the other thing we would do is the yellow paper had 3-hole punch, like you would have to put in a script or put into a notebook. The reason for that was very interesting. There was kind of a theory in those days on those hour television shows of the 70s and the 80s that no scene should be really more than 1 page long, a page being about a minute. And if you watch those shows, you'll see that in rare situations when you would do certain shows which had a lot more we call expository, or you're trying to explain things, but in most cases the scenes really whipped through. Now here's an interesting thing we would do. The reason you'd have 3-hole punch is that when you would put the paper in and you would start to type, as you're typing and you're going forward, the first hole would come through, and you'd say, okay, I'm kind of starting it, and then the second hole would come through, and you'd say, ooh, you know what, I'm kind of in the middle of the scene, I better start getting to the point. which is something I need to be doing here talking to you. And then by the time you got to the third one, which is only about an inch and a half to the end of the paper, you said, I better be getting to the end of this. And it became almost subliminal that you would actually use those holes to construct that page so that your scene would either end there, or you know that when you get to the next page, you better, by the time you get to the first hole, you better be getting to the end of that show. By the way, where I am right now, you may have wondered, this is my house. Well, and actually the back of my house. This is the deck. I thought I'd like to see what a Hollywood Hills house deck looks like. And what I did in the back here, which I think is starting to change, but because you are in either London or at least in Europe, I had the special effects people put a lot of fog in the background to make you feel at home. Unfortunately, because I'm talking so long, the fog seems to be lifting. And behind me, as you might be able to see, or probably not, is the famous Hollywood Hills, and behind that, which you see better at night when the lights come up, is the actual Hollywood proper in Los Angeles, and you'd see all the lights and things. One very exciting thing, by the way, folks, is that on this side, right down here, if you peek over, I guess in high definition you can do that, you just sort of move a little over so you can see, there's a giant hot tub. As you know, many things happen in Hollywood hot tubs that producers have. I don't know what those would be. I was very upset at the fact that when I got the hot tub and was a producer, I expected the Baywatch girls to be in it, but I think I may have taken another hot tub plan that was less expensive. It hasn't happened, but this is a hot tub that's right here, the ones you hear about. So that's an exciting thing also. Now, I'm wearing, and I've been asked, Steve has asked me to wear it, this is the official Knight Rider cast and crew jacket that was given to all the people in the cast and crew, thus cast and crew jacket. As you know, this is a tradition in movies and in television, and it's interesting because in many cases these are actually made by a company called Sichel, was at the time, which these were, and paid for in a lot of cases through the budget of the film. But I must say that on these, and I'm sure for all the seasons we had them, and these are very expensive. This is a satin, silk satin, and it is has, I'll explain this in a minute, and the back, get up here and show you the back. You can see the back, all right. I don't know if you can see the back a little bit there. All right, that's the Knight Rider logo, of course. That's all done in gold embroidery, and of course the Knight Rider also on this side. These were all paid for by David Hasselhoff himself. This is the kind of person David was. He has a lot of bad press, but I have to say that it's not, David is and was not only a consummate professional, but one of the kindest and most decent guys, and he did lots and lots of things he got no publicity for. Before there were Make-A-Wish and those organizations for children, of course children loved Knight Rider. And he would get many, many letters and phone calls, or the studio would, from mothers saying, my child is dying and their last wish is to come out and see Knight Rider. Every single time, David would take the time, something that I can tell you now, which he didn't talk about in virtually all the cases. He, out of his own pocket, would even pay for their airfare, get them a room there at the Universal Sheraton or a place near there, pay for everything for them and their family, bring them on the set, of course, let them ride in the Knight Rider car. He would have lunch with them. He just do everything he could, give them tons of Knight Rider and other kinds of memorabilia. And one of the things that's very touching, which you would hear many, many times, is the mother saying, thank you so much. My child had the greatest time. Unfortunately, they passed away, and they were buried in their Knight Rider jacket, which always gets me a little upset, emotional. But that's the kind of person David was, and we can all learn from that. I'm going to give you a little bit of trivia, because a lot of you here are trivia, and if any of you know what this means on my jacket, I will send you a prize, and you can just work this out with Steve and come up with some ideas. And it's an extremely obscure reference. But on this side, they usually have a person's name. So it should say Tom. You really can't see it, but what this says is T. Palladium, in quotes, T. Palladium. And that is something that the people at Knight Rider crew and cast ended up calling me from almost the time I started officially on the show. And if any of you knows what, forget the T part, but the palladium, what palladium stands for, what it comes from, and again, it's very obscure, but it is findable. You can let someone else know there, and I will have a prize for you. And I'll even tell you what the prize is. One of the other shows I did at the time, which I loved, was called Tales of the Gold Monkey. And I am delighted that the show, which only went for 1 year but was a massive cult hit, is now on DVD. And they have a beautiful box set, and I got to have my fantasy come true, which is they had me do commentaries on my favorite episodes. And it's a very funny, and I guess maybe from you hearing this won't be hard to believe, but when the people who did this went to many of the cast and crew and said, we'd like you to come in to do commentaries on the show, they all said, well, the person you should get is Tom Greene. If there's anyone who's going to remember a show in 1982 and can babble for an entire hour about it and say something relatively interesting, it's him. And that's why they chose me. And I'm actually really amazed and excited by how those commentaries came out. But anyway, a little plug for it. I get no money for the sale of those shows, but I will send a box set to the person. Now, I will also tell you that an individual who is very involved in Knight Rider as a fan, who I met in the Las Vegas Knight Rider convention 2 years ago, did indeed come up with the answer. So it is answerable. Now, lastly, I've been asked, I can of course go on for way too long, and hopefully this is going to be edited down, about telling stories about the show, and I've got tons of them. I wished I could have done commentaries for Knight Rider when it came out, but they didn't have anyone do those. But I specifically by Steve was asked, do I have a story about Edward Mulhare? And I got a ton of stories about him, so I will give you one that I don't think has been mentioned anywhere else. In that terrific Knight Rider companion book, that big, massive black book that you can also use to press flowers and things, it's huge. It's you know, I can't even pick it up. Amazing book. I do have a homage and a beautiful story, heartwarming story, about Edward Mulhare in that. So I'm not going to tell that story, but I will tell you one here and see if I could remember most of it. But it is my absolute favorite story. Edward, as you know, was a Shakespearean actor and a Broadway actor, and he was actually sort of known also as sort of the what we call bus and truck Henry Higgins from My Fair Lady. Of course, Rex Harrison was the Henry Higgins, but what happened was that Edward Mulhare sort of took on the slightly, well, he did do Broadway, he did do Europe of Henry Higgins. By the way, in the background, I live in what's called the bird sanctuary, so you're going to be hearing strange, exotic bird sounds in the background. That's not my stomach. But he did that show, but he also did a lot of Shakespeare. He did a lot of other movies that go way, way back. And, of course, most of us remember him from the Ghost and Mrs. Muir. You might have remembered him from that, and Our Man Flint, which was one of my favorites. I liked Edward a lot, but Edward was someone who I think felt that in some ways Knight Rider was just a little bit beneath him. And not that he didn't adore everyone on the show, and I'm not just saying this, and not that he wasn't a consummate pro, but it wasn't about the show or the fact that you had a talking car or that it was television, which he had no problem doing. He felt that his job, and he was right in many cases, was basically to be the expository king. I mean, he's the guy who came in and said things like, well, there's a young woman, and she has been kidnapped by the Venetian executors, and it's your job to find her and bring her back before the bomb blows off in Afghanistan. You will be meeting a man named, and it was that kind of stuff, and it's just dull kinds of things. And he was getting kind of upset about that, and he had just done like 4 shows in a row in which his only job was to do this long expository things behind his desk, and he wanted to do more. And there's a show that we did called Speed Demons, and Speed Demons was filled with a plethora of problems, and just personality problems, and the fact that originally it was going to be a spin-off. and then it was and it wasn't, it was and it wasn't. That always has a problem. It was directed by a magnificent director who was just kind of coming back, named Bruce Greene, no relation to me, who I used many times after that, and I still consider he and another director named Harvey Laidman, who also did Knight Riders, and every other show I've ever done, to be probably the two best TV directors around. And poor Bruce had to deal with this show, but because it was going to be, and then not, and then was, then not, a spin-off, it had to keep changing and changing. And, you know, a director, and Bruce was an enormously prepared director. And he would go home at night and take notes and come in the morning, and everything he had done he'd have to throw out because we'd keep changing it. In Speed Demons, there was a scene near the end, a cute scene, because Speed Demons had to do with dirt bike racing and a murder and a possible murder, and the fun of it was, if you might remember, is K.I.T.T ends up on the track with the speed racers at the end. But at the very end of the tag, you have to do your cute scene, and Edward Mulhare, as his character, was supposed to go on a motorcycle, because he mentioned something about the fact that he used to do motorcycle riding. No one realized that Edward Mulhare, the truth of the fact is, he was absolutely and completely and totally terrified of motorcycles. Riding them, watching them, seeing them, show him a picture of one, he'd scream. But he hated motorcycles, especially riding them. And he refused to ride the motorcycle. And it was imperative at the end that we have this scene where he rides off on the motorcycle. That was the whole point of the tag. And he did something which he had never done before. I think he was just upset about a lot of things. He went into his dressing room and slammed the door. And poor Bruce Greene, and this was actually one of the very first scenes we shot, is suddenly stuck because the actor won't come out. This is a director's nightmare, especially when a director is younger and starting out, or any director really, and that's when the actor goes in their dressing room, locks the door, won't come out, because of course time is ticking away, and at the end of the day, when you don't get the shot and you're behind schedule, they don't say, well, the actor was sitting in their dressing room pouting. They say the director's not doing their job, and they can get fired. So he came to me, Bruce did, and said, is there anything you can do? So I didn't want to go in first, and several other people went in, had no luck with him. And I realized I had to use some psychology, and I had to understand where Edward was coming from. So I did something that I thought was interesting, which is I addressed it straightforward, and I think terrified the hell out of him, and I think that's what worked. And that was, I walked in and I said, you know, Edward, I know why you're sitting here angry, and I am on your side. I think you should stay here. And he went, oh. He said, yes, I think that what's happening right now with you is that you are wasting a great talent. It is true that you're spending all of your time doing these expository scenes. I've seen you on so many other things, and you are so much better than that. And I think, I even think, not only should you sit in your dressing room, but I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do for you. I was a child actor. Not big, not like you, but I did a couple of things. And I was doing some junky little show or something in Gambier, Ohio. And I remember you were doing a road show of My Fair Lady and Henry Higgins. And I saw you in some small little theater doing this show, doing Higgins. I got to tell you, your Henry Higgins, Rex Harrison is nothing. He's trash. He's garbage next to you. This is what you should be doing. You should be going from one small town to another. I know you're making big money on this show, and I know those shows you make, $500 a week, whatever, but it's about the art, isn't it, Edward? It's about what you are and who you are. Not a man who sits behind a desk and tells Michael you must do this and that, but that you should be somebody who does what he believes in. The hell with the money, even if you do it for free. So I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the tower, to the executives, right now, and I'm going to say, I think we're unfair to Edward, and I think we should absolutely release him from his contract. Edward looked at me. What? He said, yeah, I don't think you should be doing the show anymore. You're too good, Edward. You're too good to be doing this. You should be doing My Fair Lady, 600 performances a year, all over the country in tiny little towns for $500 a week. Not here, having to come in 2 days a week, spew some garbage that I write or someone else writes, some junk, and getting nothing out. What are you making? 25, 50,000 an episode? What is that? That's nothing. It's not the money, Edward. I'm going to go. Well, wait a minute, he says. Oh, hold on. What do you mean? Young man, you don't need to get so upset about this. There's a few things. I thought maybe, somebody could get a double to have me shoot. I don't really need. I said, no, Edward. It's not about that. It's more than that. You need to be who you are. And I started to walk out the door, and he said, Tom, please, you can't be serious. Don't go up there. Maybe I'm being a little rash. I said, you are not being rash. You are being what you should be. And at times, you got to stand up. I'm going there. I'm releasing you. We're going to call your agent. We're going to get you back out there on those little shows. I walked out the door. Edward comes right out and goes, dear sir, please, have you no decency? Stop! Which, of course, I did, and came back, and he kind of fell back on the stairs and took his breath. And I said, are you sure? Yes, it's fine. He ran in. Within a second, he's out wearing his helmet, motorcycle helmet, which he had thrown out, in anger before. Goes on the set and says, oh, Bruce, young man, let's get this over with right now. And jumped on the motorcycle. And if you see the scene, watch it carefully. You will see that although he does the scene, he is terrified and terribly feeling uncomfortable. But that's the lovely Edward Moher, and I've always been proud of that. And I will say that after that, we were very careful to give him really nice parts. If you notice, we did an episode which was one of the Goliath episodes, in which he is imprisoned, and he comes up with the thing that I created called Spies Dough out of all this stuff in the jail, which is, yes, absolutely MacGyver. And some people have said that that influenced MacGyver. I think that's apocryphal. I think they came up with that themselves. But the idea of someone who comes up with all this ideas and things from his days in the RAF, and he came up with a dough that was actually like a plastic explosive which blows out the bars and everyone gets out. So we gave him things like that after that. But dear Edward, he was someone who underneath truly cared, and I always loved being able to play him a little bit like that, and was very proud that I got him out of that dressing room and kept him on Knight Rider, and quite frankly out of those terrible My Fair Lady shows. Well, that's my talk for today. Whatever ends up on the screen for you guys, it was a joy. Welcome all of you. Have a great time. It's probably way past your bedtime now from talking. I had a great time talking to you people. Enjoy. Give everyone hugs for me. Love you all. Bye-bye.